And so we came up with an experience by design is what we call it. And it's a design thinking course. And then we had some challenges, and we still have those challenges today. So 5 years later, we're still having these experience by design challenges, and people will come up with, hey, here's something that we think we can make better. And we usually have some that move forward every year and that we're working on. It has this dual effect. One is, hey, we get some really good ideas out of this from people who are living in the trenches that understand where the friction is. The other thing is people start to understand that, hey, I can make a difference. This organization is going to listen to me. And then when we ask them to go the extra mile to be really helpful to our customer, they've got the energy in their tank to be able to do that. This is Vern Steiner with the State Compensation Insurance Fund, and this is the future of insurance.
Vern, it's great to sit down with you again. It's been at least a year since I think we've had more than that, probably since we've had like a meaningful conversation, but it's great to sit down with you again.
Great to sit down with you. And yeah, time has been a little bit strange over the last couple of years. I think it has been a little bit longer.
Yeah, I suppose it could have been 5 years or 3 months and I still wouldn't know exactly what it was. But anyway, either way, it's good to sit down. And we got to spend quite a bit of time together hearing about some of the stories of the State Comp Fund around the innovation that I was lucky enough to put in my first book about your work in the direct side and some of the history of the progress for State Comp Fund. Can you give us like a nutshell of who is the State Comp Fund? What's the history there, and what have you come into more recently as sort of what I view, having been a competitor of yours, as like a rebirth of the business?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the State Compensation Insurance Fund of California, we were created when workers' compensation was first legislated in California. So we've been around, I think, 108 years operational now. And we are an available market for anyone who needs workers' compensation insurance in California. And that's certainly one of the things we are. One of the things we found out over the years is that if that's all we are, then we're not as good or we're not as valuable to the folks that can't find insurance anywhere else. And so we need to be a competitive force in the state of California as well. And you mentioned the rebirth. I think before my time with State Fund, I joined the organization in 2014. But California had gone through some interesting times around the turn of the century, and State Compensation Fund had to grow tremendously quickly to be an available market to a much broader swath of the market. I think it grew to a peak of $8 billion of premium, 53% of the California market. And at that time, given the size of California, how bad the California system was at that point in time, that $8 billion of premium made us the largest work comp carrier in the country.
Yeah.
And of course, just writing insurance in California. Sadly, it's very, very difficult to grow that fast and grow well. And given who we were and some of the reasons for the growth, a huge recession and tax shortfall in California, we had restrictions applied to us by state government. So you can't hire. So you grow, double, triple, quadruple in size and don't hire anybody. So we fulfilled the purpose of the California State Compensation Insurance Fund, which is, hey, to be an available market for lots of customers who never needed us before. But we did it in a way that had a long-lasting negative impact, I think, on our reputation and even our own culture. It was a thankless job, and in fact, we damaged the organization in the long run by having to do that. And when I came on board, a lot of that had been, it was now in the past, but the after effects were still lingering, both reputationally, the brand reputation, and I think culturally in the organization. And so for the last almost 8 years now, we've been working and I think having some success changing the brand reputation and absolutely transforming the culture as well.
I think there's an honesty about the whole thing that is really refreshing, because a lot of people wouldn't talk about it, I think, as honestly as that. And I get that no matter who I talk to in the company. So it's not just from you, but it reminds me when I was writing the case on you and telling that story of, I was at Liberty Mutual at the time that Skiff became the biggest, and we had been the biggest in the country. And so it was like, it burned, right? but I tried to frame the pulling back of the company after that. When the market opened up again, it was more competitive. I framed it in the book as, and then these other options came in, different pricing. And so, Skip shrank. And you said, you're being too kind to us. We didn't shrink just because we had competition. We shrank because, and this phrase stood out to me, is we didn't deserve a lot of the business that we had to begin with. And that was, I talk a lot about humility. That was a point of humility about, well, where are we really, and what should we be doing really, and can we do better? That really summed that up. And it's not to besmirch anyone who was putting in effort at that time. It was a very difficult situation to grow that much and not have the resources to support it, but to also step back and recognize we have to do better if we want to exist and thrive and support the market that's leaning on us and the people who come to work every day to do this work. So I really appreciated that. And I think it's quite unique in this industry. So that was the first lesson I took from your case, was we have to be honest about how we're really doing, and we can't just repaint it. And you even corrected me. You're like, yeah, you're being too nice. That's not really what it was. So I appreciated that.
Well, thank you for that. It was actually part of what was necessary for us to move forward. It's hard to look in the mirror, and it's very easy to not take accountability for things, especially when there were all kinds of external factors that both contributed to our not doing as well as I would have liked for us to have done in that period of time, and for much of the market to move away from us. But in order for us to get on the right track, we had to revisit, okay, why do we exist? And it's really to serve California businesses and injured workers. And are we really doing that the way they want to be served? And until we could acknowledge, no, we were doing it the way maybe we had interpreted that we had to do it in order to maintain being an available market whenever we were needed 100 years from now. But at that point in time, we weren't really showing up like most of our customers wanted us to show up. And so we had fewer customers than we wanted to have. So we had to go through that recognition and that honesty with ourselves. And I think it was a little easier too, Bryan, because, well, I won't say that it's easy, but the brand reputation, we would have had to put our head in the sand in order, everyone knew what the brand reputation was. So we needed to acknowledge it as well in order to start to change it.
Yeah. Well, that's my point, though, because there are absolutely carriers out there who the brand reputation precedes them, but then it stops at their front doors and they have no sense of it. And they talk about themselves very differently. And, I'm all for self-love, but you also have to recognize where there's an issue that's worth addressing. And you didn't stop there. You didn't just recognize this wasn't good enough. You did make a number of changes in how you kind of relate to who you are in the market and how you're going to get there. One of this huge endeavor around innovation and change. This is the other big lesson I took, is so many carriers are like, so we set up an innovation team or a VC unit or a whatever. You brought everyone in. And it's not to say you didn't have pockets where that was the main focus, but you really did full organization engage in having new things like design thinking and going about things differently. You did that with everybody, which was wild to me, and really trained everyone, gave everyone license to engage in these teams to come up with new ideas and to try to see them through. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think, again, it goes to the kind of the parallel paths we were on for improving the brand and improving the culture. You can't actually do much better for your customer if your employee experience isn't a good employee experience as well. And we were at that stage, which was now, I think, going back 5 years or so when we were doing this. We were taking several approaches to roll out change organization-wide. And one of them was really a focus on the customer. Yeah. And then the other was a focus on, hey, you're a part of this organization. Your thoughts and ideas matter. At the end of the day, there's 4,200 of us. And if we get all 4,200 pulling together, then we're going to be more effective than if a few of us are trying to come up with all the ideas. In fact, the ones that are trying to come up with the ideas are so far removed from what's actually happening today that our ideas aren't going to be as good as yours. So that was part of the initial approach, but people needed to have kind of the skill set to do this. And so we came up with an experience by design is what we call it. And it's a design thinking course. And then we had some challenges, and we still have those challenges today. So 5 years later, we're still having these experience by design challenges, and people will come up with, hey, here's something that we think we can make better. And a couple times a year, they'll present the ideas to me. Not all of them move forward, but we usually have some that move forward every year and that we're working on. And it has this dual effect. One is, hey, we get some really good ideas out of this from people who are living in the trenches that understand where the friction is. And the other thing is people start to understand that, hey, I can make a difference. This organization is going to listen to me. And then when we ask them to go the extra mile to be really helpful to our customer, they've got the energy in their tank to be able to do that. After we came out with that experience by design approach, maybe a year or two later, we took another look at our core values. And we had a very traditional list of core values. I think there were 10 of them. And there are things like honesty, integrity, adaptability. And I think I'd read some various articles about them, and you could read the words, and I thought, what do these things even mean? And so we launched an effort to update our core values, and we reached out to people within the organization to really find out, well, what's important to you about State Fund? What is it that you think we should be doing? And we're a purpose-driven organization. We were created for a purpose. It's not to make money. We're a not-profit organization. It's really to provide value to California businesses and to California injured workers. So out of that exercise, we ended up with just 4 core values. And one of them is to be innovative. And that, I think, it came from the embracing and the dissemination of the importance of innovation and design thinking throughout the organization. When we went to them, they came back to us and said, be innovative. And the other core values they're very action oriented core values. And they're not just words, each one of them comes with, here's what we're going to do. And then we give examples of what these kinds of things mean. But the be innovative being fed back to us after we had gone through a year or two after we'd gone through this design thinking kind of was an indication that it's taking hold in the organization. And we thought it was important enough to make it just one of the 4 that we chose for the organization.
Versus 10 that don't really resonate with people. I think that's the real takeaway. You mentioned something in talking about these the challenges, that lots of great ideas came out of them. Not all of them moved forward. And I think when we put out the case, which we worked on in, I don't even remember, I guess 2020, that it was something like 30 challenges had produced ideas at that point, and 18 of them were moving forward or had been implemented, or at some stage of approval to realization. And you could have easily said we had 18 that moved ahead so far, and this is going back a ways, but it was the delta there is the 12. And I was like, again, the humility to recognize, like, not everything's going to make it, but there's still something to be said for that. And that stood out to me as well, that like people can still try things and there's still room for it. And there's still, and we recognize what was done, even if it doesn't move forward, versus sort of burying it and let's never speak of that again because it wasn't right.
Right. And like with one of the things we have to teach our organization is that we only have so many resources, and it doesn't mean it's not a good idea, but when you're deciding how to deploy your resources, you want to deploy them in a way that is consistent with the reason we're here, what's going to have the best impact on the customer experience, what's going to have the best impact on our ability to offer a price that the customer is, able to pay. So when we say no to an idea, we make sure that people understand, is it no forever and why, or is it, a good idea, but here's our pipeline is full, and this is why yours was prioritized or others were prioritized higher than yours.
Yeah. Versus shame on you for this terrible idea, which I have seen that as well. The clear disappointment in the idea that came forward is, well, maybe it wasn't great, but there's still something to learn from it. And if we squash people's engagement in it, we lose something much bigger than that one idea that didn't happen to be able to play out right now.
We actually try to do just the opposite, and that's why, when these ideas come to their maturity, when they're ready to be presented, the team that works on it gets to present it to me, which I say get to, and I hope that's the experience that they are looking for, that they get to present it to me as opposed to has to. Yeah. And the way that I try to engage with them is and I really can't think of one that I thought was a bad idea yet, but even if it's not fully baked, if they haven't thought of, some of the potential consequences or some of, it becomes a discussion and an educational experience and it's not like, how could you possibly bring this idea to me? It's more of, all right, well, how can we address these issues, and have you thought about this? And it's more of an iterative, and some folks will then go back and they will say, okay, now let's tackle those issues that we hadn't thought of. And maybe because they just lack that perspective, that knowledge of different aspects of the organization. And a few will just say, oh, maybe we shouldn't, maybe this isn't practical. But, most of them are pretty persistent and they don't want to give up on their ideas, which is a good thing.
Yeah, of course. And then you're educating them about the broader perspective or those other nuances. So if nothing else, you have better employees for it, more enriched, more engaged.
Right.
So it's not a loss. One of the thing that we talked about in the case itself was around your direct business. And yes, you're broker distributed, but you also have this direct offering. It was a smaller part of the company, and the way you described it was really the broker offering just without the broker. So it was built for a space where you had an advisor to walk you through it, to make sense of things. Only that person's gone now. And so you have an insured who doesn't understand necessarily what they're looking at or why they're being asked this or how they should be answering it, and trying to navigate that. And so it really wasn't built for a non-advised kind of space. And you could feel that in the customer experience, the employee experience, and recognizing if we're going to have a direct offering, we need to rethink it. And that, again, like earning the business, the right sort of customer offering. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And there's something in particular around the length of the app and the process of reducing the questions. And is it reducing the questions, or let's forget the questions and build up from zero to what we really need? Because it was 118 or something questions on originally. And
it was the entire Accord form.
Yeah.
It was the whole thing. And I know that others experience this. Insurance is an old field, and some of the things that we all learned when we were starting was very linear, very, very thorough.
Yep.
And the definition of quality perhaps needs to change. It may not have changed yet, but perhaps it needs to change. And particularly when it comes to underwriting, right? Like an underwriter, they can't have too much information.
Yeah.
Right. And I accept that as true. The more information they have, the better chance they're going to have at making a good underwriting decision, a good pricing decision, whatever it might be. However, the world has changed so much that the balance of power between companies and consumers has changed. I'm sure by now, I'd be surprised if the word Amazonification wasn't in somebody's dictionary, because everything is instant and easy, and that's the standard by which I think consumers now judge their experience with an organization. And we were far from instant and easy. interestingly, when we started, we were only a direct company. We didn't become, we didn't open up to brokers, I think, until 1995.
Oh,
But
wow.
as soon, yeah, so but as soon as we did that, the business we had started to shift, so that instead of being 100% direct, over time it became about 80% brokered, and everything we built was for that broker channel. A good share of the direct business we had was legacy business that was just stayed with us and been with us for 40, 50, 60 years. And then new businesses opening up in California would come in through that channel. Folks that, if it was their first new business, they really had no idea what they were getting there. And the experience we made for them was such that they might think, I need a broker. And we understood that insurance is going to be disrupted. The way people buy insurance is going to change. I don't know how much that will happen in commercial insurance. There's certainly some players out there that have been making noise and suggesting that they're doing it. The more I read, the more I wonder what they're really doing, or if they're starting to adopt the traditional channels, and they just entered through this other doorway, this innovation or startup doorway into the insurance space. But that's just for now. Eventually, someone's going to figure it out, and we're going to have a generational change with the people that are running businesses, where they've been self-servicing since the day they were able to touch their parents' iPhone. And that's how they're going to want to buy insurance as well. So with that in mind, with the customer experience in mind, we asked our team to create a better experience, make it faster, make it easier. I think we probably had one thing going for us that many of our competitors don't. And that's that we don't really get to underwrite. We price, we take all comers, right? We don't say no. So we just have to figure out how to evaluate the risk to put a price on it. So knowing that was true, we said, okay, how can we make this as easy as possible? And boy, the pain that we had to go through with the people that we had put in place to protect us against bad underwriting decisions. I believe there were times when they thought we were just going to destroy the company, that everything we were. So we went from this, let's ask people every question on the Accord form, to let's ask only the questions we absolutely have to have the answers to. Now, the question you absolutely have to have the answer to that changes based on who you ask. So going through that process, we were still asking too many questions. So we changed the approach again and said, every question that's on here, it has to be justified. What happens if we don't have that question on here? What is the risk that we are taking? And eventually, through a lot of push and pull and a little some therapy sessions as well, we got to a point where I think we got the questions down to a total of 17, and you might be able to get a quote after maybe 4 or 5 less than that. And then if you decide to go forward with the quote, there's a few more. And when we launched that product, we immediately started writing business, and this was the end of 2019, so just a couple of months before the pandemic hit. We immediately started writing business around the clock. Now, we wrote business on Thanksgiving, we wrote business on Christmas. I don't know why people were doing this.
Everyone says that's the big discovery, right? Is like people will buy insurance at very strange times.
It was crazy. And they were being able to get through the entire process in as little as like 4 or 5 minutes. That what the average was closer to 10 to 12. But some people, they were able to get through the whole thing and buying their policy in 5 minutes. And the sky didn't fall. We didn't. We already had a post bind validation process before. We write a lot of small business, and this is focused on small direct business. We write a lot of small business, and it was already incredibly inefficient if we were underwriting this manually to underwrite every piece of business before giving a price when we know that our bind ratio is going to be 30-40%, when bind ratios are high. So we continued that post-bind validation process, and it turns out that the number of changes that we needed to make is continued to be very, very low. People were pretty honest and pretty accurate because we had such a simple process. Now we've gone further since then, and even that post-bind validation process is a process that needs to be innovated, right? There's so much information available today to just automatically check, did what somebody tell us is that accurate, or is there any reason to think that there's this one should be looked at more closely? And so we've built out a program that we call Data Aggregator, and it goes to things like our Workers' Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau, the Secretary of State, the DMV. We keep adding and adding. I think there's something like 10 or 11 sources with a vision to get more and more data sources. And we're also now planning to build an algorithm so that will tell us which of these policies should we manually post-bind underwrite. So now the bulk of the work is in that post-bind underwriting. And if we only have to do it on 5 or 10% of the policies, because the algorithm will tell us, well, there's nothing here that looks like it's inconsistent with the data out there, that'll be not so much the customer experience improvement on that end, but that's going to be the efficiency improvement, which, since we're a not-for-profit company, that doesn't mean more profit for us. It means lower price for the customer ultimately.
You're talking about things that, like, there's great outcomes and innovative and breaking through a lot of the barriers and everything, which is all true. And I know it's not always perfect and easy. Like you said, therapy sessions. What are some of the learnings that you've taken away that, having seen so many different challenges and change projects going on, how would you distill what makes them more successful or not? And maybe there's somewhere in hindsight, you're like, if we had done this differently, we'd be in a different place, or we would have gotten there faster. So what are some of the takeaways you've learned?
Yeah, I think one of the big lessons that came from that direct, we call it quote and bind innovation, and we continue to learn, is that you really need somebody in the right, with the right responsibility or in the right position to own and champion it, and that somebody needs to also understand the risks that needs to be taken in order to innovate and stay healthy and survive. It can't be just do what we've always done, but somehow try to do it faster or differently. It's got to be, let's change the way things are done. And not everyone is capable of initially thinking that way. Almost everyone is capable of getting there. Yeah. So that the champion you have has to be the kind of person who can get them there. And it works so much better when you go through the therapy sessions, when you listen to the concerns, and you may hear some that you go, ooh, they're right, as opposed to just forcing change without going through that really process of letting people bridge from the way things were done to the way things are going to be done. Yeah. So having that, for the quote and bind process, we took, and I know you talked to Dante, we took somebody who was actually a senior, an executive in the organization, responsible for all of our internal affairs, internal audit, governance, and privacy. Thought, here's somebody, we want him to learn more about the business anyway, and he doesn't have any of these preconceived notions, and he's the right kind of thinker. Yes. So we put him in charge of this, and so he had to ask lots of questions. He didn't come in knowing any of the answers, and in asking the questions, he had to get people to explain why. It's not good enough to know the why, and again, because he didn't already know, he had a completely fresh perspective, and he had the marching orders: only what is necessary, customer first, customer experience first. there's a certain amount of risk we're willing to take here in order to innovate and change and deliver a product that we think is going to be a leading product. And there's been a few projects since that we've tried to do where we thought, maybe we don't have to have somebody at that level. We'll just have it be one of these grassroots. Here's an idea that's presented to us, and it's good enough that it should, we've approved it and it should just run itself. No, we've got to have someone adopt that that project in order to make sure that it continues to get its way through the system, and we can overcome whatever natural hurdles there are going to be in different parts of the organization that it might impact. So having a champion, either someone whose job becomes to own this innovation, or someone at a level of the organization where they might own that part of the organization and they're going to champion that innovation through, I think is really important.
I was just going to ask you about the profile of them. Should they be in that business, or is it okay if they come from somewhere else? But you gave that sense that at least tangentially or directly having some skin in the game, some connection to what's going on there. Because I've seen some where it's like we have a total outsider, so they're totally impartial. Others who are, it's their business, so they're complete insider. Is there a right answer to that, or a way that you lean?
Yeah, so I don't know that I think either approach will work. If you assign somebody responsibility and this is your job to see this through, we've had success with that. Or if you have somebody where this is already in their area of responsibility and they buy in, they make it their own, that'll work. We created, I think since we last talked, we've had some evolution. We created this innovation design center, hired a staff of people to go out there and kind of scan the horizon for different kinds of technology that would solve problems we have in the organization. And the Innovation Design Center kind of partnered with different verticals, claims, underwriting, premium audit, you name it. These Innovation Design Center specialists would get to know that business, get to know what their problems are, and then take a look at what's out there, what's coming out in these startups and incubators. Will this solution help with a problem? We're not in look of solutions for problems we don't have. We want to solve problems we do have. So we thought that would be a great approach, because everyone else has a day job. They don't have time to do all that. And when they found something that was really a high priority for the organization, it worked. Yeah. But when they found something that they were really excited about, and maybe it had applicability across several parts of the organization, a new document management approach, of course, claims is a heavy consumer of document management, but other parts of the organization do it as well. It was a little bit harder to get that buy-in, that no one was championing it, and those things churned a little bit. So we're right now in the process of keeping that resource, the Innovation Design Center, but taking a look at how we can identify the most impactful ideas, the problems that are most likely to, when we solve that, are most likely to give us or our customer a great deal of lift. Yeah. And then make sure that it's owned at some very high level in the organization. So those are the successes we had.
Yeah.
When someone adopted the idea, it got done, and it mostly had an impact. We did have one out of the pandemic. We kind of pivoted and said, okay, we need to look at things that will help us operate remotely. Technology that will help us operate remotely. And here we are, I'm looking at you at Zoom today. That was a relatively easy thing to make the transition to, but I was really worried about the casual drop by. How do I know if Steve or Pete is available? I used to just look out my office and I could see, okay, their door's open, I'm going to go in and drop by. we found this technology that would basically create a virtual office environment where, we could all sign into the virtual world, and we could open our office door, we could close our office door, we could have 4,200 people at State Fund in the virtual world. They could, we actually created virtual buildings that simulated our geographic layout today. Turns out people didn't really want to sign into that very much. It was another thing to remember to do. Yeah. I remember one day I had it on and someone just started talking to me. And I was like, let's go. So, but we had to be willing to try something like that. Now, other technology like today, Zoom, I can get pinged right now. I'm always signed into Zoom, and someone can just chat with me. Hey, are you available? If I say yes, they can send me, an immediate invite, and we can be looking at each other in a second. So we found other solutions, but that was kind of a swing and a miss. It was I think a great idea, and we were trying to address a need that we had. Yeah. But people really weren't willing. We're going through so much change in this pandemic, and it was just one more thing for them to remember to sign into. That's running in the background, and it didn't work like we wanted it to work. So.
But that's a great example of, look, there is a real need. We need to try things. They're not always going to work out, and that's one of those where we hear all the talk about the metaverse. Maybe that's the path. I feel like I would forget to change my status, as I've always done with, whatever messaging systems. We used to have a, telephony system with messaging, and I always had my status wrong. Unless it knew I was on a call, it was never right. And so people start just like, talking to me, and I'm in the middle of something, and it's like, oh, forgot to change my, and so, I just never signed into it anymore. But this pre-pandemic, maybe I'd be different today, but I don't think so.
I'm not sure. I had, like I just shared, I had that problem. And then you also have the other problem that there's things that people are familiar with, and some people are comfortable with certain technologies, and some people are really distrustful. So the more things, we had no intention to use this or anything else to really be checking up to say, are they working? Are they at their desk now? But, we don't, in the work from home environment, we are intentionally creating much more flexibility for people. I quite frankly don't care if they run an errand in the middle of the day. When you're in the office, you probably needed to say to somebody, hey, I'm going to be gone for an hour. That's not necessarily something we need to do now. You just need to be responsive. You need to be timely responsive. You need to deliver on the quality and the productivity and the customer service. But when you start introducing these elements that it looks like maybe we're monitoring, then you start messing around with the culture. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a culture that is a trust-based culture, you don't have a culture that's worth having. And so the reaction that some people have to this, it's not the tool itself, it's what some people bring to the table about certain types of engagement with technology. Whereas, if you like, I don't even realize most of the time I turn Zoom on and it stays on, and now people can just, I've always been, since my kids were young and they started asking me for to put, instant messenger on their computer in the 2000s. I'm like, this chat stuff is horrible. We shouldn't be doing it. So I've never really participated in that in any kind of corporate environment either. Turns out I'm participating in it now because I use Zoom, and I find it such a valuable tool that that's just a side feature that's there.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Vern, I want to be respectful of your time, but there's a critical question I want to ask you. Is you talked about, scanning the horizon, and there's a lot of shiny objects out there. So you have to prioritize them. But as you look ahead, whether it's specific technologies or a place you think the market's going, or a way that insurance companies will be interacting with the market or serving the market, do you have any thoughts on the outlook for where things, it's called the future of insurance. I got to ask you about future looking, but where do you think, as an industry, in whatever horizon you think is worth scanning on, where do you think things are heading?
I think there's going to be, it depends on market segments, right? I think most of our policies are small businesses. Now, probably more than half of our premium is middle market and larger, but most of our policies are small business. And most of the new small business creation is happening with generations that are very accustomed to self-service.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be looking at more and more self-service, and I'm not necessarily saying direct sales. Even our broker partners, these small accounts, every time they have to touch them, it is questionable how much, whether they're making or losing money if they have to touch account and service it very often. Yes. So I think easy self-service, easy to navigate, on demand. We try to figure out, like, how do we get people the information they need so that they know how to do this when they buy a policy from State Fund? People don't care. Yeah. Most of our policyholders never have a claim, so they only care when they have the claim. You think about your experience, I think about my experience. I think I want an email from this organization, and then one morning I wake up and between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. I get 117 emails, and they're all junk. So that isn't the way of the future. The way of the future is somehow making it easy for people to get on-demand information just when they want it, and make it the customer experience so easy to navigate. And a lot of folks are working towards that, but I've seen very few that have got it right yet. They're at different points of the journey. I think we're early on that journey. An organization that's been around 108 years, we probably have things on our website from the very first day we created a website, and we're going to have to clean that up. We're going to have to make it much simpler, much easier for people to navigate. That I'm really confident of is self-service for a large share of our customers is going to be the future. We're seeing that already in some of the things we used to do through call centers. When we create a chatbot, the users prefer the chatbot, especially the users that use it over and over again. They have control over when and how much they engage. They don't have to wait, and it actually gives them the information. For us, it's way more efficient. But the survey results we get from the customer is, 90% satisfied with the chatbot experience versus the probably a little bit lower level of satisfaction with a call center experience, right? So I think that even people that want the option of being able to pick up the phone, the more the time goes by and the more they have experience with the self-service options, the more that's going to be their preference. I'm 56 years old, and I prefer that. If I give me a way to just get online and find the answer myself, as long as it's easy. Yeah. If your website or your app, it doesn't make it easy, then I'll deal with calling you, and that is inevitably a bad experience in today's world. I think many organizations are making it a bad experience by design so that people will choose the self-service option. Yeah, we want those self-service options for those simple times, or those times where it really is something we could handle ourselves if there isn't complexity. And then the question is, are you inserting complexity so they couldn't solve it themselves? And so if that's the case, and now I have to wait on hold and explain everything all over again, that's not a great customer experience when it could have been. But if I've got something that's really complex, or I need a lot of empathy, I want to get to a person and get there fast. And it's when we sort of muddy the two that we're creating a suboptimal experience. And I think you're right, that bar is moving. So we have to move with it. More people will be feeling suboptimal about the experience they just had. Vern, it's great. You're always fantastic to talk to. I think you've got a great perspective, not just on where things have been, but where they're heading. And I'm really glad that we got to sit down today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much to Vern for making some time to come on the show. He's fantastic. He's got a great energy, but also he's really humble and honest. And I love that balance of the two things. And it is critical to being able to see where you're at and what could be better. And like you said, don't bury your head in the sand, but then see what's possible. And the thing is, one person can never see everything that's possible and can certainly never deliver everything that's possible. And that takes the entire organization. And if you take nothing else from this conversation, it's the way that they empowered and engaged everybody in the organization, top to bottom,
on an ongoing basis. So, so important to Skiff's story. And yeah, if you feel handcuffed or like you're stuck because of all the constraints, just remember they have all those too, but you think you got politics. They have corporate politics, but they have actual politics. And you think your employees are resistant to change. Their employees are largely unionized and they're civil servants. So, think about getting an employee to agree to some automation. Well, you have to convince the union to do that. And I think very few carriers, if any, would ever have to face that, that automation might be a threat to employment in their eyes. So would they actually go ahead with that and agree to the training and the adoption of it? And Skiff was able to do that by how they engaged their people. So think about it. They were able to move forward, put in new tools, evolve, make changes by engaging everybody with all the same constraints you face and even more. So what could you do if you didn't have the constraints that they had? So great lesson for all of us. I hope that was valuable to you. Thank you to Vern, and thank you to all of you for tuning in. Make sure to go to future-of-insurance for more on the future of insurance, to share the show, the books, and everything. And I will see you back next time.